Hello everyone. Today I will be talking about the challenges of an aging society, the case of El Salvador, using mainly the article written by Carolina Avalos. After the civil war that lasted for 12 years and ended in 1992, Carolina Avalos, executive director of the government's Conditional Cash Transfer Program, also known as CCT, went to El Salvador to collect basic information about who could benefit from the program. CCT is a program that main goal is to reduce poverty, but in order to transfer money to a person, that person has to meet a certain criteria. And in this case, it's either having children or being a pregnant woman. In her journey, she got to meet an elderly couple who had a very rough life as a result of the Civil War aftermath. Those two elderly people lived in one-room shack and had a ramshackle as a roof, and their only bed was a hammock. They unfortunately did not qualify for this program because they did not have children, although they could have benefited from the basic social services such as drinking clean water. And although Mrs. Avalos couldn't help them with the program she came for, she was curious if there was any programs nearby that could help the aging society. To her shock, these programs that could help those couples were very few and sometimes non-existent in those rural areas. This led Ms. Avalos to create a new idea and a program called Non-Conditional Social Pension that was intended to benefit the highly vulnerable adult population over 70 years old that are living in serious poverty. As shown in the statistics, people in 1992 and after that year started migrating in big numbers to nearby countries like the United States and Mexico. People migrated from El Salvador for many reasons, and one of them is looking for a better aging future where they can feel safe. El Salvador is also facing a problem with how fast the aging population is growing compared to the services they have to offer to the aging society. In the year 2030, the people over the age of 60 will be 17% of the total population of El Salvador. And by the time we reach 2050, the population of elderly people over the age of 60 will be 20% in El Salvador. This can cause a huge problem and result in rising of the percentage of poverty if elderly people keep getting left uncared for without programs that can support them. Life expectancy in El Salvador is also estimated to be doubled in the span of 100 years from 1950 to 2050, reaching 80 years in 2050. In these statistics, we can see that the number of elderly people above the age of 60 have increased in between 1990 and 2015. But the problem doesn't stop there, because the population projections estimate that the number of elderly will double or even triple during the period between 2015 and 2050. As a result of this poverty, aging adults will be endangered and exploited by nearby dangerous gangs. According to UNHCR, Margarita Ramirez, a 72-year-old woman, fled to Mexico after being threatened by a murderous street gang and started over in Mexico. This bad situation where an elderly woman had to flee her country and her home could have been avoided if elders were protected and cared for by the programs and the government. Caring for the worst conditions of poverty can help protect and exercise human rights, and it also helps in increasing the social and human capital. Not only that, but giving aging adults the access to quality social services as simple as education, health, and drinking clean water must be improved, because those are measures that can highly impact the human and economic development of a country. Avalos also stated that cash transfer programs that are spread around Latin American countries have helped establish many social protection systems in the region, including El Salvador. Those implementations also are improving in terms of institutional coordination programs, the development of information system, and most importantly, in effectiveness. Even with all of these improvements that happened after the Civil War, the social protection expenditure has not been high enough for it to reduce poverty and inequality. As an example, social safety net spending, which is a big part of social protection, is less than 1% in terms of gross domestic product, also known as GDP, in El Salvador, which really is small compared to Chile and Colombia, where it is at 3.5% and 3% of their GDP. It's also been more than a decade since Pensión Básica Universal was created in El Salvador. And according to the World Bank in 2018, only 4 out of 100 aging adults above the age of 60 are getting covered by the program. That only makes 0.01% of the GDP, which is very little. This shows us that the community in El Salvador have yet to recover from the civil war that ended almost 28 years ago, which again causes people to feel the need to migrate, escaping the inequality and poverty of El Salvador. Young adults also tend to migrate for better job opportunities and sometimes to escape gangs and violence. That leaves the aging adults unprotected from gangs and being financially unstable. And since young adults are migrating, there are towns filled with elders and children only. And because of that, both Social Security and pension services should reflect that in their requirements and their aid. And that is why there should be some changes in the pension services and the Social Security. One other thing that Avalos believes should be changed is El Salvador's health system. She also believes that it should start taking the challenges that the elderly face more seriously. She also stated that the levels of inefficiency and inequity in the health system are high and that should be changed. She also believes that modernizing the system through technology is highly important, but more importantly is that the system should start establishing what is called public-private strategic approach and partnership between public and private sections of the health system. She believes that this is the ultimate way of fixing the health system in El Salvador, because there should be a response to the hardships the health system faces. And in terms of El Salvador, it is chronic diseases and long-term care. In the case of El Salvador, the issue of long-term care, also known as LTC, in the health system is critical. In Latin American countries, about 8 million people, which consists of 11% of the population above 60 years old, are dependent. According to the definition published by the World Health Organization, also known by WHO, a dependent person is a person in which cannot perform at least one basic task of their daily life. In El Salvador only, this definition applies to 1.7% of the population, which is around 28,000 Salvadorians. This caused the LTC, or the long-term care, to be a main problem in the health system. It was a problem especially in terms of recognizing the characteristics and needs of these groups, as well as evaluating existing informal care. Other than the health system problems, the efforts of trying to give elders a sense of protection is still very little. The main reason for the lack of policies that protect elderly is that this problem, according to Avalos, have been carried in a very complex social and political context. Avalos states that Salvadoran society to this day are working on having democracy and still try to solve the corruption problems. Because of these problems, the progress have been slowed down and sometimes as Avalos stated, reverted some of the social achievements in those 25 years after the Civil War. For a country like El Salvador, who just started on giving the elderly protection, Avalos believes that studying other nations that are age-friendly is a must. According to the United Nations, more than 80% of Latin American countries' population will live in cities by the year 2050, and that is why making modern cities age-friendly for the elderly should be worked on right now. In May 2018, McKinsey Global Institute reported on an article called Smart Cities, Digital Solutions for a More Livable Future, and revealed that Latin American countries, compared to other countries around the world, are way behind in terms of digital solution implementation, which will eventually negatively impact the aging group in Latin American countries. But looking at the region only, we see that the cities that started to deploy more digital solutions have made a noticeable progress in terms of mobility, security, health, public services, economic development, housing, and community, compared to the cities that didn't. From this we conclude that a change of the reformed pension system, an integrated health system, and an introduction of innovation and information technologies are very important steps to start a new era of care, attention, and long-term care for the aging community. Those type of constitutions and reforms need to change their ways for the better, especially for the growing part of the population, which is the aging community, and making sure they are enjoying their rights as humans while being prepared for any possible future challenges they might face. Those basic and simple moves that the country can do can solve this complex problem of poverty, especially in the vulnerable community. And if these problems are not looked into and solved immediately, the country will not be able to control or contain the other problems that might emerge because of globalization and demographic transition. In this presentation, we mainly talked about the challenges of an aging society in El Salvador, but this problem also exists in other countries in the Latin American region, unfortunately. All these problems that El Salvador and other countries in the region of Latin American countries are suffering from lead us to wonder and question why and when did those problems occur. Those problems, unfortunately, have been in the region for a long time. Mainly in the El Salvador region, it started when a group of leftists, which were the Marxist-Leninist group, rose against the right side, which were the conservatives, and they were the government at that time. The reason the Marxists rose against the conservative government is because the Marxists believed that there shouldn't be rich and poor, and that the wealth should be distributed among the citizens, while the government at that time were a conservative government that believed in capitalism, which results in stratification of the community. This problem divided the country into two sides, the left side, which is the Marxists, and the right side, which is the conservatives. This resulted in a war that lasted for 12 years that is now known as the Civil War of El Salvador. That war was obviously devastating. According to American Historical Review, this war took the life of around 75,000 civilians and thousands of soldiers, which resulted in many people being forcefully displaced inside El Salvador, and many became refugees to nearby countries like the United States and Mexico. The United States also provided weapons and support for the conservative side, since it benefited them and their investment in El Salvador. The war ended by an agreement between the right and the left side, and resulted in making El Salvador a democratic country. Even though the war was finally over, people were still devastated and disappointed, because the whole point of that war was to get what they were promised, a comfortable life and a chance to voice their opinions. But from this whole presentation, we see that the situation did not get any better for the people and might have gotten worse. Thank you everyone for listening, and let me know if there is any questions.